Can we begin, please? Thank you. Just one piece of housekeeping. This session will end at 5:30, and 1 hour later, 6:30, we will all meet in the hotel lobbies to walk over to the Philharmonic Hall to see the anniversary, the gala concert tonight. If you have not yet picked up your tickets, you should have received an envelope from Sarah with a ticket for the concert. So I look forward to seeing you all at the concert. We're moving back in time. The Paderewski Association is 100 years old, and if we move back another 100 years, that's when Johann Wolfgang von Goethe published his West Eastern Divan, a very famous collection of poems exchanging cultures, bridging cultures from East to West. And since we are in Poland, and since our member, the Chopin competition, or its director, Artur Szklener, told me he could come here for a discussion, we thought it would be a nice idea to hold an exchange of ideas and bridge East and West from Warsaw originally to Fort Worth, and exchange some ideas between Clyburn and the Chopin competition. Now that Jacques, unfortunately, has fallen ill with COVID, we went one step further and went even further away from Warsaw, all the way down to Sydney. And I'm very happy that Marcus Parker from the Sydney has agreed to replace Jacques and lead this discussion. And we're really looking forward to hear what these two giant competitions have in common, and where they are different, what visions they have for the future, what ideas they have for the future. So let me introduce to you now Artur Szklener and Marcus Parker. The session will be moderated by Maria-Lena Petasz from Helsinki. Please give him an applause.
So good afternoon. We got the wonderful spot after having eaten and the coffee, and we are all the brightest, but at least you are relaxed listeners. And I have to tell you that we will spare space for your questions. We have agreed that, we can do them all along, but if we go to questions, then don't be offended if I cut it and move it into the next subject so that we don't get stuck into only one. So welcome, Artur and Marcus, and it's lovely to have you here in the coach divan, so to say. Some of us had to look what is a divan, but for me it is known. I thought in Poland we could have had a real divan here, but this is a very good substitute to that, a modern divan. So to start with, could you just, we all know the Sydney and the Chopin competition as being the great piano competitions in the world. So just to start with very shortly, what was the idea behind these competitions originally? Could you please start, Artur?
Yeah, I think that it's quite striking for us today when we realized that the initial idea of Chopin competition was to promote Chopin music. And there were three elements actually that are very modern and quite actual to our times. First was relying on sources, on original scores. The second element was introducing to the public not only the easiest pieces. So was to show that Chopin output was very full of variety. And the third element was actually the very invention of the model of the musical competition, because at that time it was in the 1920s. Musical competitions were not so common. We would say even that they were not organized at all. And Mr. Jerzy Żurawlew, Professor Jerzy Żurawlew, is an anecdote, but it is a true one, was going in a train with some young gentleman, and he was listening to the discussion about some sport championship with enthusiasm. And he thought that what to do to have this kind of enthusiasm related to the high culture. And that was his idea. Let's take the most valuable music and the model of sports championship. So this element of emotions, of competition and art was from the very, very beginning of the idea of Chopin competition.
Wonderful. So that's actually Chopin competition is one of the oldest competitions that still exist today.
That's true.
What about Marcus?
Well, actually, we drew inspiration from Europe. Australia, being obviously the other side of the world, didn't necessarily draw on its own cultural identity until very, very recently. So a lot of our culture was coming from Europe. So it was back with a Hungarian immigrant, actually, after World War II, that came to Australia, but also felt that there was something which she could create to actually bridge that gap between Australia and Europe. So she, Claire Dan, it was her name, she established the Sydney International Piano Competition as that opportunity to actually create a bridge and to celebrate culture and music between what she loved in Europe, but also her new home in Australia, in Sydney. So that's how the competition was established.
And when was that?
That was in 1977. 1977. So yeah, so coming to 50 years in 2027.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I mean, here we can also take a bridge to the significance of the competitions. I mean, they have a great significance today, but I mean, how would you describe the significance?
We've actually examined the history of Chopin competition, and it is quite striking that even before the Second World War, there were three editions. This competition very rapidly became a very popular international event. As far as I remember, the third competition, there were more than 200 applications for the third competitions already. So it's a scale of a really very, very popular international event that has been reached already before the Second World War. As probably everybody know, the biggest success of Chopin competition is that some of its winners became the legends of pianism, and obviously that's a great heritage that we've got in hand. And we are really, as organizers, we always stress that. We try to be modest. We try to show that we've got this great value, and our main mission is just to add our contemporary view, our contemporary possibilities, but not to spoil the value that we've been given.
You were saying that you're trying to be modest. Why does a competition have to be modest?
Modest? I mean that because very often the journalists, they ask us how we do this, how we do that, and the answer is very often that with Chopin competition, it's like with the grass in a royal gardens. You need only very few elements: the best composer, the best formula, and 100 years of organizing it.
That sounds beautiful. I mean, I'm trying to vision that. But really, I have to say that, if it originated from the idea of the sports, it feels like a sports. I mean, the way, I have never visited Chopin competition myself, I'm sorry to say, but what I've heard, it feels like it is a national tournament. It's really, really important in the society, and your halls are full and tickets are sold very early. So you have accomplished what you actually wanted.
And it's actually been like that from the very beginning. Now we are trying to withdraw from that a bit. We try to show the artistic part more. We try to stress that, because one of the goals of our competition now is not only to promote or not to promote Chopin music, but to promote classical music, to show the values related to classical music to the general audience, because it's one of the very few classical music events that go in ranges in interest of the public into the area of pop culture. It's comparable. I can show you examples in a couple of minutes into what extent Polish national television, the main channel of Polish television, was aware of that fact that Chopin competition it was absolutely a unique situation for the program of television. But what does it show to us? What does it tell us? It tells us that the competition is a kind of a power that we can use for certain purposes. And our main purpose now is promoting classical music. But as you say, from the very beginning, even the narration, the wording, were absolutely taken from sports. There were contestants, there were fights, there were our group, especially Russians. So, Polish group was weaker than the Russian group, and so on and so forth. And I think that we think as organizers that if we control that, if we balance that, we've got a very good relationship between emotions that are understandable for all the general audience, but at the same time, we've got beautiful music.
Well, talking about sports and competitions, that's very much about the Australian scene, right?
Absolutely. We don't have a chance to be modest. We have to actually fight against the sporting world, because Australia is, 99% focused on sport. And so for us to have our place and our voice and our niche within our country, in the musical world in our country, we can't afford to be modest. We have to find new innovative ways to actually engage with audiences, to encourage audiences to even walk through the door, is a big challenge. When you have massive sporting stadiums and you have 100,000 people all selling out, which sounds like people do here at shop, and they actually buy these tickets well in advance, whereas in Australia, well in advance, the sporting contests are all sold out, but it's actually the cultural events which actually have to work so hard. And we have to actually find our own niche and to change how we present ourselves. And I think the Sydney has done that. Over 40 years of competition, run very passionately by the original founder, didn't actually reflect the changing community and society where we were in Australia. And so when I started in 2015, and also with our artistic director, Piers Lane, it was a chance for us to actually kind of really use that and to leverage the ownership that did exist with the competition, but to also use that to actually find our pathway to ensure that we actually could have a platform, and that we could develop that platform for the long-term sustainability of the organization. So not necessarily is it actually all, unfortunately, about the music. I mean, for our competition, it's about the music, but for us to survive, it actually has to be a much, much bigger picture, which takes in, unfortunately, a very strong representation from sporting events in our country.
Yes, so I mean, if I take a hand raise, in how many countries do you feel that the sports events are easier to sell and have a larger audience than the classical music? Very acceptance. I mean, it is tough, it is, but I mean, we do have a special audience, and they are very faithful to us, which we are, truly happy about. Well, I mean, we have experienced at this moment, how arts and culture come closer to politics for very many reasons. And one of them, for example, being the COVID situation, where we really had to be, we were part of the whole society. I mean, what was your experience about your competitions facing this new situation, and how did you adapt with it?
Actually, as you probably know, we were one of these competitions that were in a disastrous situation, because we've had a very, very optimistic plan. We were in the middle of international tour of promoting the competition. After 10 or 11 press conferences, starting from Tokyo and ending in Miami. And just after coming back, we came back from Miami on the 1st of March 2020. And 2 or 3 days later, there was a huge official press conference in Poland with a deputy prime minister opening it. And I remember talking to him just before this press conference, asking if he was really sure to announce that the original date was going to kept. And in 5 days later or 7 days later, everything got locked down. So it was obviously a crisis for all of us, for all of the musical industry. But what is the most important I would like to share with you is that we've had, I think that some kind of success in Poland, because after we have moved the date of the competition, it was becoming more and more clear for us that even the second date is under question, that we are not certain if we are going to organize that, because we've moved it just a year ahead, so to the October 2021, and it was a mistake because we underestimated the power of pandemic and the length of pandemic. So at the beginning of 2021, we tried to find a solution, and we managed to establish actually 2 legal acts that opened the door for organizing international musical events in Poland. We've copied the regulations concerning allowance to come into our country and quarantine. So 2 regulations were changed for Chopin competition, but in a way that affected also all the other events of that kind, international events. I think that it was really a success that finally in Poland, high art started to be treated as sport. However ridiculous it might sound, many of our colleagues, organizers of musical events from all over the world, were asking, how did you manage to do that? How did you manage to organize? What are these people doing in a concert hall? Yes, it was partly because of these regulations. And also we were a bit lucky because just 2 or 3 days after the competition has finished, there were first cases, COVID cases, noted in an orchestra, in a Philharmonic orchestra. So we were just, we love that Chopin helped us a lot. So probably that's part of our success as well.
Well, could you, Marcus, go to the ministry and ask the same?
Absolutely not. That just astounds me that that Chopin can actually have a seat at that high level of government table to actually create such a change in legislation to allow major changes within a global pandemic. That just kind of blows my mind. If we wouldn't even actually have a dialogue like that at all, even on a local, let alone a state or a federal level in Australia. So, but then on saying that, if you're a sporting organization, then that's a totally different situation. And I think that starts to then talk about the value which maybe the Australian government has on culture, and which is a significant difference to where the Polish government, in this example, has placed such a value to what we do, or you guys do, sorry, in terms of the cultural landscape here in Poland and the value and importance of that. So for my example is that, you know, in the first year of the global pandemic, the Australian Open is obviously a massive, big sporting event happening in Melbourne. And the Australian government allowed sporting people to come into the country. And those changes which you were talking about from a cultural perspective worked the opposite in Australia. So it was the sporting context that was able to change that rule, but only for sporting organizations. And I think that kind of speaks a little bit more to the volume of how a government supports the arts versus not so much in Australia. And we relied on different means to actually kind of create the competition which we deliver.
And to be honest, I wanted to mention that. I wanted to share that experience with all of us, because I think that is an example we could try to use as a federation, because it's a case study. If one of the governments, European governments, decided to solve this problem this way, maybe it should be shown to the other ones. Because it really does change the situation. It really does. The other factor was the audience, and we just fitted to the regulations, and it allowed us feeling 100%, because at that time 70% was allowed, but people who were vaccinated didn't count to these limitations. So we've gone through the huge process of checking all of our visitors, during via the system, ticket selling system that wasn't prepared for that purpose. So we were sending hundreds of thousands of emails to people, asking them for declaration that they are vaccinated, and that allows us filling the audience 100%, and no transmission of virus noted.
Wonderful. So is there anything that you would like to ask from our distinguished speakers here today at this moment? Just, checking if there's something. There we have. Oh, okay, hold it. Okay.
Thank you very much for your stories. It's not a question, but just another compliment that I would like to give to both of you for the wonderful competitions that you organize. And one aspect that I would like to mention about the Chopin competition is the magnificent archive that you have on your website of past performances. It's huge, and also the information about Chopin's music, it's enormous, and it's a wonderful example for other competitions as well.
Thank you very much for that. Actually, that's the way we are trying to be modest, and our ranges. I think that's something that I would like to mention. Independent agencies counted that Chopin competition this time reached awareness and had audience in number more or less 250 million people worldwide. So 1/4 billion people. That's the power of Chopin.
We are amazed, totally amazed. I'm moving on a bit. If there are other questions at this moment, you will get a chance. Okay. So we were talking about the importance in your countries and all that. So it's somehow reflected in the funding system as well, right? So I mean, Marcus, how does your competition function? I mean, do you get your money from the government, or do you have to fundraise the money, or do you have a foundation behind the Sydney competition?
Yeah, we don't receive a single cent from government funding. So that's from a local level, from a state-based level, and a federal level. So all of our funding is actually self-generated. So it's either through philanthropic donations, less so with corporate support. It's very difficult, particularly in Australia at the moment. But the majority of our money does come through our own generated box office through ticket sales. So that probably is maybe one similarity that we may have, is that even though our audiences are small, they actually have a passion and a drive to actually buy those tickets in advance, because they've been around, some of them, right since 1977, and they love the competition, and they love that connection with music and young artists. But we do have a situation whereby that the competition can only become more sustainable, or continue to be sustainable, with continued philanthropic growth. And that philanthropic growth is either from individuals, it's from trusts and foundations, or more and more, and I hate to say it, but it's around bequests. So people leaving gifts to the competition in their wills, and it is at the moment our biggest kind of generator of income. It's just that we don't know when we're going to get that income.
Yeah, I was actually studying very carefully. I mean, your website about, how you create, donations to your competition, because I'm doing that for a university in Finland. I found it very interesting to find for an annual or cycle of giving, you've given names like Hammerklavier stage and pathetic stage. I mean, the amount, it was really innovative, and you have created almost all kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, and we had to do that because the original founder was a very important and very independently wealthy person. So the competition never actually developed its own philanthropic giving programs. So our programs have actually really only started from 2015 in an organization that's almost 50 years old. So we had to find those ways to connect through like our Cycle of Giving program, which takes the names of some of Beethoven's piano sonatas and the connection with Beethoven to 32 sonatas and 32 competitors which we have coming to Sydney. We also then have other ways whereby we can engage with individual donors at a higher level which go to support competitors, because one of the things which we do in Australia very well is the hospitality and the drive and the want, the desire from our audiences, but to connect with a young artist. And so what we've decided, and which we ran for the first time in the 2020, then postponed to 21 competition, was to find that connection with individual donors to actually connect with a competitor. So creating a dialogue which continues beyond the competition, and then hopefully a lifelong friendship, which then takes that young person back out in the world as an ambassador for the competition. But then internally, back in Sydney, we've created a very strong narrative between the donor and the competition to maintain and to grow that funding source.
Yeah, I believe you called the club 32.
We do, yes.
Okay, interesting, exciting. But I mean, it's also very exciting the way you have in the Chopin competition, because you have an entirely different structure for funding.
Yes, we are a public institution and we've got public funding, but it doesn't cover obviously all of the costs. But we've got this kind of security. So the hard costs of organizing the competition are public, and we are trying to use the competition because it's the most attractive cultural event for the sponsors. So we try to use it as a central point of our relationship, long-term relationship. So we say, okay, you can become a sponsor of the Chopin competition, provided that you help us for 5 years with the museum, with education, with all of the activities that are important for us, that you would never pay for because they are not attractive for you from marketing point of view, but we give you the Chopin competition. So that's the way we're trying to talk to business. But I think that there is another factor that is important that is derived from the fact that it's public, that is organized also by the government, that it's recognized by media, and it's both. I think that there are two elements that work together. So one is the interests of people who just demand having a competition, but another one is just this kind of awareness of leadership of media. And one of the most striking example, I think, was that the last gala concert of our last competition was broadcasted in the main program of the Polish television during the main news time. And the news was moved a bit and was broadcasted from the concert hall in a concert break. So it was a message to all of the Polish citizens of Poland. The Chopin competition for that day was more important than the news, than the politicians, that all the other news, even the weather forecast or the sports information. Yeah, I'm trying to show that in an entertaining way, but it's really important because that changes awareness of the general public, and this demand of being during the competition at the competition is obviously also very strong. We don't have any borders in selling tickets. We've sold them within 3 hours, a year and a half before the competition, only because the biggest ticket selling system in Poland collapsed. Because we would do that within 15 minutes, but it collapsed. So we had to wait for restarting it, and it was just a nightmare. The worst day of my working at that office. But finally, we did manage to put down to service and to sell these tickets within 3 hours.
Wow. Well, anyway, we were just talking a bit about, being able to donate, but people are able to donate to Chopin competition as well. I mean, say, for example, as for prizes or something. Do you have any consideration? I mean, who can donate and what kind of prize, which kind of evaluation do you make with that?
It was very limited this time because in the past there were donations like concert proposal, for instance. We limited that. So now for the last competition, there were only possible financial donations and financial prizes. But a very interesting effect arose itself because we were broadcasting all the competition on YouTube, our YouTube channel, and it's not a crypto marketing. It's just our partner, and there was a possibility at that time. I think that now it changed. Now you can just donate to the channel, but at that time you could have bought a special post, and people were buying these special posts to say thank you. Just to say thank you that we've got such a great musical cultural event for free. It wasn't a large sum of money. It wasn't something that was significant in a competition budget, but I think that it's quite significant in terms of making a community. And we do our best to keep that community, not only to the next competition, but just to be together.
Sorry, I'm just wondering, are you free next week to come down to Australia and have a chat to my government? Because this is just unbelievable. And you talk about the media. I mean, the media in Australia, is very limited. I mean, we're very lucky if we get onto like a single channel as, a 3-second news item, not necessarily to move the news broadcast. It's just astounding what you can achieve or have achieved. So yes, next week if you're free, I'll pay for your airfare down there.
I think that's not me. That's Chopin.
Yes, but I mean, Marcus, you also have lots of donors. You were just talking about those, but I mean, how do you accept certain donors and how do you allocate, the money for certain prizes, for example? I mean, do you have any hesitation? Say, is there something that you would not accept?
Yeah, we did a bit of an overhaul, really, of the entire prize list back for the 2016 competition, and we purposely moved away from composer-based prizes, which was historically where all of the money from donors were coming to support. Not to say that it's not a bad thing to actually have those, but there were more meaningful prizes which we could award based on the artistic talent or performance of a competitor. And we, in 2021, when we were forced to move the competition entirely online, it also gave us a chance to actually look at other different types of prizes which were reflective of what we were asking them or setting them as a test and a challenge to achieve. So, for example, for the first time we had a special prize for the best encore. And so we were looking for someone who actually could think about their program overall and to choose the most appropriate encore and how they were presenting that or how people spoke. So we started to, and I know competitions are already doing this, but it's not something new, but for us it is a new step and a new challenge for us. And it also then connected to the donor. So the donors that were less interested or no longer could give the only Chopin prize, because there's only one Chopin composer, all of a sudden then had a whole range of other opportunities which they were interested in. And obviously being, you know, Australian and Australian competition, many of our donors are very interested in supporting Australian artists and supporting Australian composition. So we have special prizes to support the industry of composers particularly, and we ran a separate composition competition during the first lockdowns in 2020 to achieve that generation of new Australian work, which is now a test for the competitors to actually play one of those new 1994, I think it was, new Australian works for the piano, which is then a great sidestep for us to be supporting our industry in a wider context of not just pianists, but also in this case in composers. But then again, for our connection to our donors and our sponsors, it's much easier for us in a localized way to say, will you support Australian artists or Australian composition or Australian work? And there are it's easier to kind of create that kind of partnership with a donor that way for us.
Right, you know, I come from Finland, where, you know, mostly the cultural life is very much governmentally funded, but we are in a transformation phase where, you know, the government funding is, you know, it has not been cut off, but I mean, the government is showing that also the cultural life needs to have their own sponsors, and there's all kinds of campaigns from the ministry to the universities to create their own funding. And slowly we are shifting to another kind of phase where, you know, giving and sponsors are coming to the cultural life. There's lots of debate, you know, I mean, if you take the money from someone, I mean, how much are you allowed, or how much should you compromise your own ideology? Or, for example, with the competitions, you might think, I mean, what kind of prizes are you awarding, and how much does it reflect, you know, the mission or the vision of the competition? And, you know, having the government funding, you could be very pure. Also, on the other hand, if you lead the sponsorship and donors in a right way, I mean, you can still, you know, remain with your own identity. How do you feel about this?
Look, one of the things I just want to make a comment about is that it's great to have a donor as sponsoring a prize. But for us, because when we don't receive that government support, it's not actually helping us as the organisation. So we are in a process of transiting the thought process of our donors to support the organisation, because without the organisation existing, they actually won't be able to support a prize. So it's a strange one, and this is where Club 32 comes in with our thinking there. It also with our Cycle of Giving program. It's about supporting the organisation and changing that mindset of support. So not necessarily about prizes, because we don't receive that government based foundation, and we still have to raise it ourselves to exist.
I've got to say that there were rumors in the past, but quite far past. I'm thinking about 60s or 70s and 1970s, that there could have been some influence or trials of influences of politicians or political thinking on the jury members. But I can tell you that during our organizing the competition, there was even not a single trial of that kind. The only interaction with the Ministry of Culture I had, it was in 2015, when we had a discussion. The jury members were having a discussion if there should be the first prize. It was just an initial discussion of the evening. And somebody has passed this information outside, and I had a phone call from the Ministry of Culture saying, "I'm begging you, if you have to have exec for, let it be 2 first prizes. I will give you money. It's not a problem. It's not a financial problem, but don't allow the situation that we don't have a winner of the competition." And it was actually too late, because the verdict was in the meantime was already done. But I was just want to say that it's safe for the it's been safe until now, and I think that we are approaching some possible changes because of the war and all of these discussions about politically influencing programming, let's say that. So it could be that we as organizers will have to choose in time if we want to be fully independent or if we want to be into some extent related on public money. That means politicians.
Right. Are there any questions at this moment from the audience? Oh, Gustav, surprisingly. Please. Yeah.
There is one interesting aspect about the Chopin competition, which make it quite exceptional, which is one aspect about which many organizers have mixed feelings, and that is that already in 2010, the Chopin competition has published all the points by the jury given to all the participants in every stage. That makes it very exceptional, and you have done this ever since in 2010 and 2015 and also now. So my question, Arthur, would you, with your experience, would you recommend to Marcus and other competition organizers to do the same, or what are your feelings about this?
Well, thank you very much for this question, and it's a huge topic. It's a huge topic. I've had a more than hour lecture to the students about that topic, actually. Yeah, I think that there are both pros and cons. Just being very, very sincere, because obviously we are open to we are used to the democratic, transparent world. So our initial thought is obviously yes, the more transparent the better. But there are some processes, mostly subconscious, that might influence the jury member judgment, because they know that their judges will be published, their scorings will be published. So being transparent, we try to avoid them cheating, but at the same time, we stress them the way that's consciously or not, they may influence their artistic judgments. That is obviously a con. So if somebody asks me if I recommend that, well, I probably would. I think that being transparent is still a more beneficiary, but everybody has to keep in mind that effect. It's not omittable.
Do you publish the results?
No, we don't. No, even in the jury room, the vote is secret. So the jury are not aware of the voting process or who's voted for whom in the jury room, which I guess is, a way to not influence, future votes or however it may work for other prizes. But even right until the last moment, because we have 3 voting sessions after each of the rounds, of course, but even the jury members after the first round or the second round are not aware of even who has actually been awarded such prizes that have been deliberated on at those stages. Even the selection of the ones who go through to the next rounds, obviously they're public because everyone will be very aware of who's playing next. But other than that, no, we don't share or publish even after the competition, the voting.
So let's just, take a small hand vote. I mean, how many of you publish the votes of the jury after the competition or during the competition? 1, 2, 3. And the rest have not? Yeah, so I mean, still the majority of us is not, publishing, but I mean, this is an interesting discussion, and it's very good to hear your opinions on that as well. So let me move a bit forward. What are you looking for? I mean, you arrange a competition, you invite in this case, pianists to participate. So, I mean, what are you looking for, and how do you reach your goal in finding the right winner or the laureates or the contestants?
We are obviously looking for the best pianists, for the best artists, and as I said before, we try to use the Chopin competition as a power, as something that can move, can attract, and can help promoting classical music, especially to general audience. If we want to change something, we are just examining very slight, each and every detail, and there will be some slight changes. But I think that the very formula of the Chopin competition should be kept. So obviously we will try to reach new audiences to also both geographically and in Poland. But at that stage, and now I think that well, maybe there is one very major difference or change that has to be done. Most of our jury members are quite sophisticated in age. We have to think about new generations. So there will be some other people that we invite to the jury. But the very formal and organizational part of the competition, I think that we won't change very much.
Okay, what about Marcus?
I think overall we're looking for an ambassador. So that person who actually ends up taking away the first prize then also goes back out away from Australia and is then the ambassador for our competition. Of course, they're going to be the best out of the field of the 32 that actually are invited to come to Australia. That we have to take as a given, and that is the job of the jury to actually achieve that. But for us, it's actually finding someone who is going to have that, I want to use a term, the X factor, that is actually going to enable them to have that career or that extra step or start ahead of someone else. So that simply by winning the first prize is only the first part of it, and that's just part of the achievement. But what they actually have along with that that whole package is something that is saleable, something which we can go into venues, into concert halls, to promoters, to agents, to actually kind of use to support their career development and growth. And I think our jury has a big responsibility to achieve this. And I think a good example is what happened in 2021, where our entire competition was taken online. So we didn't insist, due to the COVID situation around the world, that they all had to go to a certain venue on a certain day to play on a certain piano, so that everything was homogenous. So what we empowered each of those young artists to do was to actually find the safest place from where they could actually record their competition entry. So what the jury had to do was to listen to 32 different young artists in 32 different locations. So the bubble which exists around competition venues was entirely removed. So the jury then had to listen to the musicality of a young artist, not necessarily how they performed on the most beautifully maintained Steinway in the most acoustically sound concert hall. And that for us gives us comfort, I guess, to a degree, that when we take them out, and around Australia is a great example, is that Australia is a vast country, the size of Europe, but we have a population of 25 million. So to get from A to B, from one concert venue to the next, is lots of hours of driving, which means we're going a long way from the major cities where there's not well-maintained pianos. They're not proper concert halls. But what we're looking for is that artists who can actually create the most magical concert on whatever instrument that they have to actually deal with. So for us, finding an ambassador that actually celebrates that and what we do as our competition is really important.
I've got to say that as far as we are talking about being online or being live on the stage, we were desperate to do everything to be on stage, to have artists on stage, and to have audience in a concert hall. That was absolutely something that we were desperate about, and our direction was even opposite, because now we've got to what you've done, because now we've got the situation that the first, before the preliminary round, we've got a CDs sent to us, or DVDs sent to us, video material. And that's the first selection, the pre-selection based on that. And we were considering remodeling that element and replacing it with auditions spread out all over the world. We were thinking very seriously about organizing such a pre-selection before the 2025 competition. But because of the COVID situation, we won't do that, because it would be multiplying the risk. So for this time, we just keep the DVD part. But still, as I said before, this live contact of audience, jury members, and the pianist and the musician is something that we think that shouldn't be changed, shouldn't be tuned, shouldn't be removed from the very formula of competition.
I think many of us have considered, live auditions, and sometimes it's difficult with the money or just now with the COVID, but I mean, there's always a hesitation. How do you get the best impression, and how do you really squeeze down, if you have hundreds of applicants, how to find the best ones, and not everybody has the best tools to make the recordings nowadays. I mean, the situation has balanced a lot, so I mean, many of them are really in an equal stance when it comes to these recordings and DVDs. But I mean, that's the most important part, actually, of the competition. And then one has to have a clear mind what you're looking for. So also the pre-selection jury has to be of a higher standard, in my opinion. What does the repertoire matter? You have a Chopin repertoire, you also have chamber music, right, in the second round. So how does that, reflect on what you're looking for?
We are looking for some new Chopin pieces.
Yes, surprisingly. Well, what about Marcus? I was visiting the Clyburn competition, and they used to have the chamber music in the repertoire, and then they left it out this year. I mean, have you had hesitations on that, or what will that reflect on a musician?
Yeah, look, I think it comes back to my answer before, actually, is that what we're looking for is an artist who's well-rounded and someone who actually can work that we could use to actually kind of help them in their career. So if they actually have that capacity to be a great chamber music partner, then that's something which we want to actually also test and define through the process of having that. I mean, of course, we all have to have our rounds with orchestra, so we know that there is the continuation of being a great soloist. But again, we look to actually develop partners in our regional geographic area in Australia, which obviously includes New Zealand. So the Michael Hill, which is also a member of the World Federation, we're looking to find partnerships whereby we can actually work together, but we can't just tour a solo pianist and tour a solo violinist, and so we want to kind of combine them together. So we need to look for someone like an artist who is actually able to be a collaborative partner in a chamber music setting, so that we can actually kind of enhance their careers and their engagement possibilities in our geographical part of the world as well.
Just, it's very detailed, but maybe interesting for you. Last time we allowed Opus 28, so the cycle of preludes, to be played instead of the sonata. Now we would like to change it a bit, so that the set of preludes could be played, but sonata would be mandatory. So we are now thinking about the formula, how to do it, because we think that artists who showed both of them very often were very interesting, and it's something missing if sonata is not played during the Chopin competition. It's a detail, but
No, details are important. They are very, clarifying. Personally, I mean, I run a voice competition, and say in my world, it is of a big difference. I mean, if you're looking for an opera singer, or if you're looking for someone who's more rounded and being able to do the lead songs as well. So, I mean, this is a relevant question. And what is wonderful about the Federation is that we do have competitions that, do not always look for the same type of a musician, but we have, different kinds of views of what we're looking for. We're always looking for the best, naturally, and we're all promoting classical music. But then, wonderfully enough, I mean, there's a little variance, and also, what we're looking for in the competitions. I'm moving to a slight, more difficult way in approach, and asking about the question of the biases. I mean, do you feel that, being self-critical, what kind of things you try to prevent when you choose your jury, or when you work with your applicants? I have personally realized, I mean, everybody in the jury has their own feelings and the things they like and what they're looking for. But, well, what are your experience on this area, and how are you working on these issues? I mean, it could be something with the sex, or with the nationalities. We were talking about denationalization, or other things. Is this an issue in your competition? Have you been discussing this?
I don't think that the nationality is any issue during our competition. We don't take it into account at all. We've just been talking about that during the previous session, that there are some issues with national identities and with showing what nationality the participant has or is from. But they are because of some tensions, sometimes even diplomatic ones that have got nothing in common with art or with our competition. So there are external issues, like how to call Taiwan, for instance. So that these are the issues. But as far as the very core of the competition is concerned, we are very strongly focused on artistic personalities, and this is both on a stage and in a jury. As you probably know, most of the jury members for years now in Chopin competition are ex-winners or ex-laureates of the Chopin competitions. And what I think that is quite important, that I like a lot, but I'm observing that all the time, is that we are observing different kinds of personalities being in the finals. So it's a proof that the jury members, for me at least, the jury members can separate their own artistic and their own preferences from their judgments. So they are not looking for just only one model, on one ideal way of performing, and that's really the agenda that is close to me. I like it really a lot. And from the organizational point of view, I think that it's very important that we try to have a teamwork. We try to have a good atmosphere and support. Because I said very briefly, that transparency is to prevent cheating, but it's obviously not that we suspect anybody. It's just making mechanisms that allow the judgments as independent as possible, and that's what I always say to jury members during the first meeting, that nobody will have any comments about any judgment, no matter how extraordinary it is, provided it will be independent, because we've got system of recalculating, and we can cope with all of the very original artist judging as a jury members. But if jury members, for some reasons, for instance, talk to each other, influence each other, then we've got situations that are very difficult, or more and more difficult to be coped by the system. Well, I don't know if I answered your question, but that's our kitchen actually of our work.
This is probably more a comment than actually what we do, but I think we as human beings will always judge. What we see, what we hear, what we taste, what we feel, we're always going to make a judgment. So to try and remove that from a competition environment, I think is extremely difficult. And I don't know how, other than actually trying to give that trust to your jury and to communicate the importance of actually being apart from musically judgmental, but otherwise, rather than, what you're not judging of what you see or not necessarily taste or feel in this case. But I think I don't know if we can ever remove that entirely and to address that. I mean, which we're not doing this time around, but what I would love to see is that our pre-audition rounds, pre-selection rounds are actually done blind, so that you're actually not seeing, you're only listening. So again, linking back into finding that artist who is actually able to convey what they're playing simply by what they're playing and how they play it. Because as I said, we're not doing it this time around, but it's something which I'd love to explore with our artistic director and the focus of our competition to actually be more fair, at least from that starting point. Because once we get to 32 and they're actually in Australia, they're on the concert platform. So all of a sudden, you actually then have that second element of sight, as well as what you actually kind of hear. So it's a comment. It's not something which, we are or are not doing.
So you feel it's human to be subjective in a way?
Well, so that's why we've got the formulas that make the competition intersubjective, right? This is the situation, that the whole system makes the judgment intersubjective.
Right. Any comments to this from the audience? Do you have any questions or views? I mean, this is a very interesting subject, actually. Florian.
There are two questions in the chat, actually, that I should ask you, and they're not directly related to this. And they're from Jacques. Actually, I'm sure, Arthur, you know this question already because we talked about this before. You mentioned YouTube in one of your answers. How can we use YouTube for the benefit of the WFIMC? Even though we are on many platforms, YouTube is the place that people are going to, and we are losing the data and the potential sponsors and donors. How are you dealing with YouTube? Why are you using YouTube in your competition?
That's another very, very important and very quite a big topic, because that's we are talking about YouTube or other platforms. We are talking not only about storing data, not only about the streaming services, but we are also talking about building audiences. And we've managed for 10 years now we've got 12 years, sorry. For 12 years, we've managed to build a comparable in numbers the audience to what I said, but 1,000 less. So it's 250,000 people just subscribing to our services. And why am I mentioning that? Because I think that we could join our forces. We could try to make a service that would at least cross-link us, but maybe somehow, I don't know how technically how to do it in YouTube, but that could show the other competitions to the audience of particular one. So I think that we should join. We could at least join our efforts to build a common community, common audience. You know that this kind of audience needs constant work. We publish something every week or even more than once a week, just to keep these people interested, because they that's the modern world. And obviously not everybody, not all the organizers can afford that. Not everybody has got not only power, not only money, but also even the material that can be published this way. But if there are a couple of dozen publishers, then we can really have a scale effect. And why YouTube? We've tried many different platforms. We've got also our own, but YouTube obviously gives us ranges, gives us possibility of reaching people all over the world, and give us quite a reasonable support, I could to say. We've got an official partnership, and actually we as Chopin Competition, as Chopin Institute. But if it was a decision of the federation, I think that we could work together to try to use that for all of us, not only for the Chopin Competition. Yeah, that's my opinion, obviously.
Yeah, I know the question wasn't directed at me, but I'm just going to make a comment, is that I support what you're saying in terms of using it as a kind of a marketing tool and audience development, because rather than actually, I think, losing, I think we're actually gaining audiences and awareness and engagement with our competitions by having our stuff on a platform like YouTube. We have our competition freely available on YouTube as well. We put our competition in 2021 behind a paywall, and so you had to actually purchase to actually watch the competition. But what we found is that in a digital world, no one actually paid. So we reached more audiences by offering it for free in a context of in YouTube, which we hope that eventually will translate into audiences actually converting into a ticket sale and coming to a concert and sitting in the concert hall during the competition. So I think YouTube is actually a powerful tool as a marketing exercise, not necessarily as actually seen as a platform whereby we're losing or degrading what our competitions are and what our young artists have to offer.
Well, there are different models and different opinions about that. We've had endless discussions in our team if we should publish everything in YouTube, or if we should publish, for instance, only samples and link to the commercial service. Our observation, because obviously we are not a specialist, but our observation is that the more we give for free, the more people buy of things that we sell. So if we give the competition for free, then we sell more recordings. Then we've got more visitors in our museum. Then we've got more visitors in Żelazowa Wola, the birthplace of Chopin. So there is only one batch. And fortunately, it doesn't affect so much competitions, because for festivals, we've got huge costs of licensing costs. For the competitions, we can have the licensing regulations in our rules. We as organizers can just have this copyrights of the participants. And for good competitions, just to finish. As all of the ones associated with us, participants want to be seen online. So it's not compromising their copyrights. They just want to be with us. They want to be seen on YouTube. So yes, I agree. We can have all of these electronic media work like a snowball. So the more we put them all, the more we get when it turns. So if we work together, the result will be much ghigher. Thank you.
One more related question. You both have some fabulous images, some fabulous presence, marketing presence, online, offline. How many people do you employ full-time for your marketing, and what percentage of your total budget do you spend for marketing?
Wow, I should copy that question to my promotional department chief, because it's a very small team. I don't want to lie to you, because we just 2 people resigned now, but there are five people working on promotion, marketing, fundraising, everything, actually, everything that is related to other funds than state. They are just great people working 24 hours a day.
It's just me. But during the competition, we do have other support staff, but just for contract periods. But what they have is the assets, the design assets from which they can work with. So that's the most powerful tool which we give them, so that they can actually go forth and do all the stuff which you see online and, well, maybe not so much in print, but certainly on social media platforms, is that they actually do have the assets to work from, which are on brand, which is a really important thing for us, is that we maintain our brand and our visual identity, and the essence which goes with that, which has become who we are as the competition.
Any other questions? Now is your time. Well, Gustav.
Well, Marcus, short question, or a short answer maybe. If it's a question that I think many competition organizers are afraid to ask. If, God forbid, there would be another pandemic again. Of course, there's the question what to do. This situation, what happened in 2020 with Chopin competition, they made a very clear statement, we will not go online. It was a wonderful statement on your website. And with your experience, Marcus, Sydney competition, you had a special edition totally online. Now, next year, you have your competition. If there would be, again, a pandemic, would you do it again, an online competition, or would you skip it and wait for another live competition again?
Yeah, the answer is really simple. That would be a hard no to doing it online again. It was expensive. It was far more time consuming than we and our production company ever could have imagined, mainly because we've never been forced to do it before. But what we lost was live performance. And that was the most important thing. So having come through and experienced the misery of the last 2 years, but the joy of actually still being able to create something online, would we do it again online? No.
I would maybe add one thing, because I said that it was a mistake that we've announced in a year's time that it will be in a year's time in October. I think that we should be a bit more flexible for future, and we should consider the months that are the safest. So if we know that the situation is blurry, we don't know if the pandemic is going to come back or not, we should, as a backup plan, the B plan, we should have the summer months, just saying very briefly, because that's the most probable that we can organize with audience.
Any other questions? Well, you know, to conclude here, well, I have a question for you. I mean, what kind of developments or changes do you see coming here in the end? I mean, any thoughts on what's to come?
I hope none. Really, seriously, we've been thinking about the VR, for instance. My colleagues were very enthusiastic about that, and I said, "Well, no, stop! Can you imagine the audience with the goggles on their heads?" And so, fortunately, there was some technical problem, so we didn't have the VR. But since talking seriously, well. I think that we should be very conscious about changing all of the innovations that could change this basic model of perceiving art.
I think for us, we have learnt a lot from the last 2 years and what we achieved through all the various lockdowns and having to do a lot of stuff online. So for us, we want to actually change and evolve to actually use what we've actually gained. So we don't want to actually kind of leave the, I mean, maybe linking back to what you were saying, Gustav, about would we ever do an online competition in whole again? No. But what we want to do is to take those elements from the online competition, which worked really well, and to put them into the live competition. Very similar to what we now do here for our GAs, is that part of it's in person and part of it's also online. So it's a hybrid version. And that for us is, again, part of our audience development strategy. So we need people to come and not buy a ticket to go to the football. We need them to buy a ticket to come to us. So how do we make it more accessible, more interesting for them to come to us? And for us, that means change and evolution, and to learn what we can take, and also what we can share and learn from these collegiate meetings about how we make our competition better into the future, which responds to the community, specifically the community in Australia.
Well, we could say that for everything, we are part of the living community, and we need to see what the environment is and live up to it, but not lose our visions and what we are working for. I wish to thank you both, Artur and Marcus, for this wonderful discussion, and the audience for your patience and your activity and the questions that we have received. I have to say that this was, supposed to talk about the differences also, but I felt that we very much spoke about the things that we do have in common. And I think, maybe it's the recent years, or maybe all the changes that we've experienced together as a federation, but I foresee that, we are quite united in the missions and visions, and, fighting for the classical music tradition and doing it in an honorable and talented way. Thank you, everybody, and with the housekeeping service, or whatever you call it, Florian, I think 6:30 at the lobby, right? We shall meet to continue to the gala concert and then the dinner. And let us continue this wonderful meeting together, and everyone online, have a nice evening and prepare a nice meal for yourself. Thank you.